Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
You're watching.
We're watching. You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy. Fanboy.
Fanboy.
Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
Dot. I assume Tom.
I met this man for the very first time at the Catalina Film Festival just after the passing of Wes Craven for the Wes Craven Award. Right now, we are talking about the 40th anniversary of A Nightmare on Elm Street. This edition also has the uncut version, as if the 1984 one didn't take 10 years off my life as it is. Robert Englund, it is a pleasure to catch up with you.
Well, you know, it's really been a pleasure for me recently to get to promote, the 7-film collection, the ultra high def, 4K, because I had been trying to find something for my relatives to watch. I had my wife's family down a couple of months ago, and it was a Sunday, and I put everybody on the couch, and we'd finished our pizza and our bottle of wine, and I popped on Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, and I had, spontaneously somehow found the 4K, the ultra high def 4K release of Rear Window. And 90 minutes later, my entire family, oldsters, youngsters, teenagers, sister-in-laws, brother-in-laws, we all sat at the edge of the couch, perched there with our mouths hanging open, because it was phenomenal. It was so clean and pristine, and it looked like it was minted yesterday. You could see into every apartment that Jimmy Stewart voyeuristically spies on, trying to solve his serial killer crime with Raymond Burr. And you could see, every prop, every color, every detail. And I had seen the movie with my parents in its original theatrical release, and it never looked as good, never was as crisp and clean and wonderful. So I've realized the last, 10 or 20 years talking to fans that many of them have only seen their favorite or some of the Nightmare on Elm Streets on video, part of the video revolution, on VHS, on that old dog-eared copy that got passed around in student dorms, or the one that, from the mom and pop video store that kids were allowed to rent when mom and dad rented Pretty Woman, and then they would scare the bejesus out of mom and dad, and they have that great familial experience. But for all those fans, and I'll stop my high pressure salesmanship here, but for all of my fans that only encountered a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, however wonderfully, as a familial experience at home, with that pizza getting cold and the beer getting warm and that funny old quilt on the back of the couch, with mom and dad or stepdad or stepmom or single mom, single dad, older brothers, younger sisters, whatever the experience was, I promise you that if you have a favorite, whether it's Dream Warriors or a double bill of 3 and 4 or Wes Craven's New Nightmare or the original, check it out, because they really look great. They really look, and Stephen Hopkins did a whole production design thing on part 5, and it just looks great, in the ultra 4K. So I'm done.
No, listen, and it also
done
came
with my pitch.
It also came with 3D glasses. So, if we weren't scared enough the first go around, now we get you in our living room physically, torturing us psychologically.
Well, I found a poster recently from Paris of Nightmare 6, the 3D version directed by Rachel Talalay. And the poster in Europe, you realize, especially it's ripe for laser discs and soundtracks, but you realize that even though they received the same proof sheets from the stillman photographer on the set of the various Nightmare films, they didn't necessarily choose the same images that were chosen by the American publicists at New Line Cinema. Consequently, I'm always discovering new images. And there was a opening day poster for the Champs-Élysées, the main boulevard in Paris, Le Odeon Theater. And it was an image of me in full Freddy drag, but I had the 3D glasses. They'd brought them and given them to us as presents on the set. And I was kidding around with the Freddy hat and the Freddy outfit and my full makeup. And I was sort of doing these Bob Fosse moves, just kidding around with the glasses on. Anyway, the still man had snapped a few of those. I never realized it at the time, but they used it for one of the French posters. And not only did they use that great rare image of me clowning around and doing my Bob Fosse impression, but they had sequences from the movie, stills, that were in 3D, transferred onto the big giant 3-sheet in front of the theater, as well as they had mounted the 3D glasses on the poster too. So I saw this kid brought it in for me to sign at a con, and I had to tell him how rare it was. He had no idea. There was like one tear in the center crease, and that was it. But I don't think he had any idea just how great and valuable and rare that was. But it also, I remembered that day, getting the 3D glasses and thinking that was cool, and remembering 3D movies from my childhood. And also, goofing around, as Bob Fosse. And somebody had the strange idea that would look cool on a movie poster, in Paris for the opening of Nightmare 6.
You have over 175 credits on IMDb, yet here we are 40 years later revisiting A Nightmare on Elm Street. There's been 8 films if we count Freddy versus Jason. What is it about this character that we so enjoy being scared and wanting to revisit, especially with the world being terrifying enough as it is?
I think I'm just the luckiest son of a gun in the world. I'm inherited the mantle of being the logo for the entire franchise. Freddy Krueger is the logo, and I am Freddy Krueger. So I get that, benefit of the doubt. I just get that sort of free, wonderful thing of being the symbol for everybody's enjoyment of the franchise. There would be no successful franchise without all the wonderful actresses that play the survivor girls, the final girls that get the best of Freddy in every one of the films, all the way from Heather Langenkamp as Nancy to Monica Keena in Freddy versus Jason. But I've inherited this great blessing of fame, this kind of logo gift that I have now from the thing, and consequently, over the years, and the first 7, 8 movies took 20 years to do. They did the first 7 from 84 to 94, and then Freddy versus Jason in 2004. So it's a nice clean 20 years that went on there. But along with that, there's this huge merchandising machine. And especially as recently as COVID, a lot of those artists were at home, those little busybody artists, those great illustrators and stuff. And they were cranking out more posters, fun posters, retro images and illustrations. I mean, there's one that I keep seeing at various film festivals and cons of me on the broomstick in part 6, as the Wicked Witch, Freddy as the Wicked Witch. And somebody's done that in a beautiful deep blue. And you can see my gums. Freddy Krueger's gums are wet and moist, and his eyes lit up. And you see the little Elm Street house in the distance. And they've done it in a blue wash and a red wash. I still can't decide which one I like best. But there are literally hundreds of new illustrations, as well as new, wonderful, sometimes cartoony, sometimes hyper-realistic action figures. And so the collecting audience of fanboys and fangirls has exponentially increased this last 40 years, along with the films and the merchandising. So I've inherited that wonderful being the logo, not only of the franchise and the films and the film posters and the rethought out film posters, but also all the attendant merchandising that's happened for the last 40 years. And it's every time I do a show, I see a new action figure or a new illustration or a new comic book, an ultra violent one or a sexy one or a kind of cartoony one. And I see, Freddy, I mean, my God, he's, there's Lego Freddys and there's the Pop Freddys, and they're all in different incarnations. So I've just sort of inherited this wonderful, it's out of my control, obviously, and I've just sort of been along for the ride on it. But it's something you never learn in acting class. You never get taught. So it's like, don't get off the merry-go-round while it's still turning.
I love it. My friend, one of my oldest friends, his daughter Quinn, his eldest daughter, has been a fan as well of the franchise for a while now, and she's not even in middle school yet. What's it like when it's become this cross-generational thing? Because I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, as a child, and now here we are showing our kids the films that we grew up with, and you get to meet the younger kids at the conventions that are either slightly terrified but eager to meet you, or just gung-ho excited to run up to the table. What's that like, seeing the parents now introducing the kids to the franchise?
Well, I think we're on our third generation of fans now. And also we had the benefit of being right there at the beginning of the huge video revolution. And then we, obviously cable and DVDs, and now, all the new formats and the big screen TVs. So we've had the technology. We've been able to sort of tailgate, the technology, and that's been a real gift to the franchise. But I get fan mail from kids where they draw Freddy with crayons. I mean, they're literally that young, and I would never recommend a film for children, that young, that are still working in crayon. But I think not all of them actually have seen the movie. They've seen an action figure, or they've seen a poster, or they've seen an old DVD cover, and they've been sort of hypnotized and intrigued by this silhouette, this image of Freddy and the dirty red and green sweater, and that hand with the extended fingers of almost the extension of his evil. And they're compelled to draw it and send me these drawings. I have a whole wall of them behind me here. But I think it's just a boogeyman and an image that's captured a lot of young people's imagination. Now, gosh, do I feel old when I get the older parents, and they've got, younger kids or grandchildren that they've introduced to it, on their, weekend, whatever their weekend, film event is that they have at home, where you got to see this movie, you're going to love it. But they've got the whole franchise to go through, which is kind of fun, because we do have that kind of binging sensibility now, and we benefit from that. People really can get involved. I think we're one of the first horror movies that you could really pause and rewind and watch again. And so it made it a lot easier for a lot of fans originally and subsequently to really get behind the plot and the symbolism and the Easter eggs that are kind of, inferred and included in the franchise that Wes kind of wanted there, this sort of loss of innocence in American suburbia, and how only the children and the teenagers have inherited it, from the adults, the sins of the fathers, and they have to, mature and confront the evil in the world. And that's me and yours truly.
You've been the Phantom of the Opera. You've been a stage performer like myself. You are also a product of the CSU system. When you get to not only move to the stage, but back to cinema or television, and I know they say acting's acting, but when you're on stage, you're performing and making it larger than life for the entire theater. And then for film, you pull it back because you're in this frame. There has to be something that feels almost a little more intimate on camera because of the nuance in realizing that you're in this little window.
Well, on stage, you have the energy of your fellow actor, and you're juggling, and you're keeping the plot and the show and the dialogue and the scenes in the air like a juggler. But you also have that feedback from behind the footlights, beyond the footlights, the audience, and their attentiveness and their energy and their empathy with the plot or with you as a character. That's a wonderful thing to play with, and it's really invigorating. And so there can be a lot of magic in that experience for the performer, but it's different. There's an intimacy in film work, but there's also all of that technology around you, whether it's your microphone or the camera or the lighting or the people behind the camera or the effects people or the falseness of the set that you're on. And many times the actor you're working with is not right there. He's behind the camera because you're getting into a series of closer and closer shots in coverage. And, you know, it's strange. You learn not how to make it smaller so much, but how to kind of breathe in that little area that's your own, that little space that's your own. And you learn as an actor, you have to kind of fight for that space because everybody wants to share it with you on the film set because they have their own job to do, but you sort of have to protect that little area. I know there's a story Vanessa Redgrave tells, a wonderful actress, and she went back and forth from the theater to film, and she's marvelous in both areas, but she would take her contact lenses out when she worked on film, which made her look with more energy and focus with more energy, but also everything was a blur about a foot and a half from her. It just all blurred out because she didn't have her contacts in, which helped her concentrate and fill that little area with the magic of, and the words you chose, intimacy. And you do learn how to do that and play with that. But there's also a drawback. I know when I was starring on a television series, and I remember I'd had a great piece of advice from Lee Strasberg about relaxing. But this was in a theater class, and I could never really apply it. And I was rewarded by directors, both on film and in theater, for my energy. But it dawned on me in the middle of doing a television series what he meant by relaxation. I just didn't have to kind of put myself on a low boil anymore, that simmer of energy and adrenaline. I could ignore that and just kind of breathe and be. But I also, the other thing you have to confront then is there's a voice in your head that's also getting in the way of that intimacy that you mentioned and the experiencing the scene. And that's that voice that tells you not to act. Well, the contract says actor. I'm acting. I'm acting a role for you. It's not me. I'm trying to bring a truth that's appropriate for whatever kind of film I'm doing, whether it's melodrama or documentary realism, you know, kitchen sink realism, you know, or whether it's stylized, whether it's broad comedy or a plotted comedy, situation comedy. And that voice is also horrid to have going on in your head. The voice telling you not to act. You're on film, don't act at all. And I've seen other actors deal with that voice and err in that direction. And you have to remember that you are an actor, you know, and yes, you must learn how to behave in the intimacy of that world that the camera is invading, but you also have to hit your beats, you know, so to speak, in the plot and in the dialogue and in the scene structure. There are I know I've had scenes where the editor has been off the mark on what a scene is about, and I'll have a really important line. Maybe it's about somebody being ill or somebody that's going to die or something like that, and you're expecting a close-up on that in the final product. And you have another line in that scene where you might be asking somebody to pass the salt, you know. But when you said pass the salt, maybe the lighting was great on you. And maybe a piece of neon in the background flickered or something, and they love it in post-production because they've seen this scene 100 times when they're editing and they're adding music and they're color timing it and they're juxtaposing it. When you do it, when you say that, you know, grandma's going to die, that's the most important line in the scene. that needs to have some coverage, and that needs to probably be a medium close-up at the very least, or a close-up of the person that's hearing it. But when you get the close-up for Please Pass the Salt, because you look great because the light's in your eye, and you did a cool gesture with the salt shaker, and the neon looks great over your shoulder. And then you get to the line where you say grandma's dying, and you're kind of the camera's not even on you, or it's a wide shot because they needed a wide shot there because of the way they'd been cutting the scene up until then. And you realize, I don't know. And then you know that can happen to you. That becomes a kind of, that's just one more thing you worry about when you're acting on camera. The great Scott Wilson from Walking Dead and In Cold Blood told me, the two of us were drinking tequila once years ago at Topanga Canyon on the beach. And he was all upset because he'd just seen a rough cut of The Great Gatsby. And he said he had a couple of these great scenes and close-ups, but they got ruined because they put the 100-piece London Philharmonic Orchestra and 50 violins under his close-up, which made him look like he was begging sympathy more than he actually was, which made them it looked like he was playing sentimentality or sentiment more than he was. And so the big lesson that day after a couple of tequilas with Scott Wilson was you also have to worry about the music they're going to put under your performance, because the music can be underlying the emotions, and maybe you want to fight against that a little bit. But then again, that's that voice in your head. Now you're worried about the music. Don't act. Worry about the music. It's like on top of, oh no, I'm worried about my bald spot. I have a pimple today. And I've got, how do I handle my props? Did I get the beer up high enough so they see me pour it on in the frame? It's just, so there's just a lot of stuff to worry about. I think the thing I love about film acting the most is you never get it perfect. You never get it completely right. It's there for posterity. You have to live with it. The ride home from the set a lot of times can be really anguishing because you're worried. You're full of anguish because you're just worried about choices and decisions you made. And then you figure out and you solve that moment an hour and a half later when you're on the 405. God damn it. But it comes with the business,
With movies that require, since we're in theme right now with the 7 set films of Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween coming up rather quickly, and my friends dressed up as you when we were kids, and we still see people doing it now. The makeup aspect and how the makeup has evolved from 84 to 2004 and putting it on, I can only assume that year one was this 4 or 5 hour process to put on these burn scars. How does that evolve and become less time consuming over the years, and then trying to match it to the first film?
Well, Freddy's interesting because I did 8 films and a television series. So I was really into makeup a lot. And that's not counting Stephen King's The Mangler that I did with Ted Levine. That's until the Hooper. That's not counting Phantom of the Opera that I did with Bill Nighy, for Dwight Little. And those were extensive makeups too. And Stranger Things that I did a year or so ago. For the wonderful, talented gentlemen that do Game of Thrones, that designed the Night King, among other things. So different makeups at different times in my life have taken longer just because they're more intricate. I know the guys that played the orcs in A Lord of the Rings. I think they were under the knife for 7 hours every morning to be camera ready. That was an extensive makeup. And I've heard about others that are just, extraordinary. I was always around 3.5 hours for Freddy, depending upon teeth and contact lenses. If, they were, using those in certain sequences, or they were getting in close enough that I would put my fake teeth in instead of just having my own teeth blacked out. And that would add a little bit of time to it. And I think the makeup got finer. And by finer, I don't mean better. I mean, it got thinner, more almost prophylactic thin as we went on. But on the other hand, even though it may have been thinner and I could animate it easier underneath it. It also looked great, better in close-ups, but as I got away from the camera, it wasn't as defined as David Miller's original makeup. Whereas I could stand almost full figure in that makeup, certainly in a cowboy or from the knees up in a shot. And that makeup really caught the lighting well with its nuanced crevices and boils and things. So, there's a trade-off. One looks better in close-up, one looks better, down the hallway a little bit in the lighting. And that was something we had to deal with and know about. Also, you can't light the makeup the same as you light the other actors. So they had to step into my lighting. On the first movie, for first couple of days, I would step into Heather Langenkamp's lighting or Johnny Depp's lighting. And of course, they're beautiful. They didn't need any help anyway, but I would step into their glamour lighting and it was too bright for me. It was too hot for me.
Wow.
What? Okay.
No, and Heather still looks fantastic. I just saw the photo with you and all the Survivor girls recently. Everybody in a white T-shirt, is one of the promo photos, and that looked fantastic.
Wait, I'm doing something here. Oh, okay. Trying to get rid of. I had a little message from you that just came on.
Interesting.
What did you say about Heather and them?
Oh, I said I just saw the photo with you and the Survivor girls from the franchise. Everybody's in a white T-shirt except you. And, you look like you're having a good time, and we presume that the missus is off camera just giving you dirty looks.
Well, she knows everybody now. Nancy knows the OG Nancy, and we're dear friends, with Tina, Amanda Wiss, and Lisa Wilcox, and, I Be Still My Heart, Lisa Zane, one of my old crushes. And I'm so happy for all of them because they're all, Heather's doing Stephen King movies now, and Amanda's doing lots of voice work and television guest star work. And Lisa's doing lots of low budget horror. She's starring in a lot of little horror movies now. So I'm really happy for all of them. But, I say this, and I'm not trying to curry favor with the feminists out there or female filmmakers, but our films would not have been the success they were and have the longevity and the legs that they have, no pun intended, had it not been for our Survivor girls and our Final girls, the performances by those girls, because so many of the fans invest in following and identifying with the journey of that character. And I also take pride in the fact that I think Nightmare on Elm Street is really the first horror film that packed the theater with horror fangirls, not just the fanboys, but fangirls. And that's not taking away from Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, which predated us, or Sigourney Weaver in Alien. But nonetheless, we really kind of packed them in. Before Nightmare on Elm Street, you'd go see a horror movie, and it was, probably 80%. Fanboys. And after the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise began, that shifted a lot. And by the end, I think it was probably 50-50.
And then the soundtrack also helped, the tie-in soundtrack. Dawkins' Dream Warriors, the Fat Boys came in at one point in time. There was something about the soundtrack in the 80s that enhanced the movie experience. And we'd go to the theater, then we'd go to the record store and buy the soundtrack affiliated to it, whether it was a single or the whole album. And it just gives it this total different immersive experience.
Well, yeah, we had Goo Goo Dolls, we had obviously Dawkins and the Fat Boys. Fat Boys did a really famous video. I think Will Smith had a song about, and Fresh Prince, and DJ Jazzy Jeff had a song about Freddy Krueger. But yeah, and for me, what's strange, the soundtracks are terrific, but what's weird, this is so, pigeonhole and fanboy, but I was saying earlier that every once in a while, someone will bring me one of the soundtracks from Europe to sign, and they open up like a book, and the photos in there, the stills, there's a couple of familiar images, but aside from the familiar images, there's stuff you've never seen before. Just stuff of us standing around, or Wes Craven standing around in the upside down room and things like that. They're really kind of a wonderful collectible because it's not an image that's seen a lot of daylight, you know.
Yeah. I met you the year after we lost Wes, and he has an award named after him at Catalina Film Festival. I'm not
I think
trying to make.
Ryan Coogler was there.
I think yeah, Ryan Coogler.
Yeah,
Coogler
and
was
Billy
there as well.
Zane.
Yes.
Billy Zane. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to get you to speak for Wes because obviously he's not with us. But what do you think his reaction would be 40 years later to see how the franchise has withheld?
Well, I think Wes planted enough sort of classic Easter eggs in the film and made it intentionally kind of timeless. I think he always wanted to do that. And he was getting into the kind of meta element of horror. After Scream came out, a lot of fans returned to the successful Wes Craven's New Nightmare, but it became a hit, a big hit after Scream because people then knew how to watch it. It was a little bit ahead of the curve. And I don't think that a lot of the big action movies, comic book movies, would have survived as long as they had without Guardians of the Galaxy and Deadpool, which poked fun at stuff that was just beginning to bubble up in our perceptions as we went to see the original superhero movies. And we had to tease it a little bit, and I think that also Wes saw that. And I know Sam Raimi has that chip on his shoulder, so to speak. And he knows how to play with that a bit. And we need a little more of that. I think that there is this strange, without mocking the genre, I think there is room for a hybrid horror comedy. I think that part of the reason is Wes used to say, if you can get an audience to laugh off their nervous laughter with something, it's easier to set them up for a scare again. If you're just scaring them over and over and over again relentlessly, the body, the cathartic, empathetic body begins to shut down a little bit, and it will laugh at you instead of with you, which you don't want. You don't want that to happen.
Right.
And I think that was happening with the superhero movies a little bit. And then they did Guardians of the Galaxy and Deadpool, and we were sort of able to kind of expel that thing that had been bubbling up in us.
Yeah. And here we are with the 7 film collection and 8 total, just understanding now, the mindset of Wes, what he gave to us with the foundation of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and still talking about it all this time later. It's got to resonate. I mean, I still hear anytime someone says 1, 2, first thing, boom, Freddy's coming for you, and we just keep doing the count. What are some of the unique interactions that you've had recently? Because I know you do the convention circuit as well, and seeing people or hearing people share their stories and how the film has affected them over the years.
Well, the big takeaway for me this last 10 years has been how many people, and we began the interview with me saying this, but how many fans saw it not in a theater, not on a theatrical release, but saw it at home with their mother and father, or with brothers and sisters, or friends, or in a dorm room, and shared it that way. And they stopped it, and they paused it, and they watched the scene again, and they, maybe dad went in the kitchen and tied some steak knives on his fingers with scotch tape and scraped at the window to scare them all. Or maybe mom and dad jumped, in their bathrobes up in the air when they tried to tough it out through one of the movies and got scared themselves. And the kids love seeing mom and dad scared for the first time. So I get that feedback. And, some of those first fans from the early middle 80s, some of their parents are gone now, and they have this memory of going to a Blockbuster or going to a mom and pop video store and choosing Nightmare on Elm Street 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, whichever one, and coming home with mom and dad and the pizza, and the Pepsi and the beer, and watching it. And mom and dad have passed on now, and they have this great shared cathartic memory of this movie. And so it's become like a substitute. It's sort of become like the horror, It's a Wonderful Life. You know, people will watch it every year, or they'll binge all of them every year at Halloween. Or there's, you know, like the kids like to watch and binge the Taylor Swift albums when they first come out. You know, there's a lot of Halloween parties now where they binge some of their favorite movies. They'll binge 3 and 4 as a double bill, or whichever ones they want to see, and that'll be, or they'll be going on in the background of the party. It's just become a staple now, and it's just that thing that happens where you become a part of the fabric of culture.
Right. Robert, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I saw the timer. I want to thank you so much. As soon as this runs out, I want to click back. I want to tell you a couple of things off the record, if that's all right. Nightmare on Elm Street 7-film collection on 4K and digital is available now. It is always a pleasure catching up with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, also, where can we find you on social media if we want to connect?
RobertEnglund.com. That's the real me.
Perfect. Thank you so much.